This offseason for the Detroit Lions fans, the quarterback position has definitely been one of a tumultuous nature, but now it's becoming such a problem that there are some fans that are talking about renouncing their faith in the leadership if they don't make a certain decision. And we're going to talk about it. Stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. My friends, this is going to be an episode that, as crazy as it is to believe, I never once thought that I was going to have to make a podcast episode talking about this. I never once even imagined that this was something I was realistically going to have to spend time talking about. But the reality of the situation is that there are fans out there that are extremely disgruntled when it comes to the quarterback position. And what I'm specifically talking about is the backup quarterback position. Let's just call it for what it is. The backup quarterback position at this point, it has reached a boiling point for a certain amount of fans, because there are some fans that have just purely had enough. They are demanding action. They are so tired of Nate Sudfeld that they want him gone, and they are tired of excuses. They are tired of explanations. They only want to talk about Nate Sudfeld in one simple capacity, and that's to hear that he is now gone and that the Lions are no longer connected to him, and vice versa. And they want somebody different. And as it would chance to happen, a new quarterback came out of nowhere, played very, very well over the last 2 drives of, Saturday's game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's Jake Fromm. And now Jake Fromm is this quarterback that some of these Lions fans are really desperately, I wouldn't even say desperately, they are just emphatically wanting to be the new guy that, replaces Nate Sudfeld. Now, when I say replace Nate Sudfeld, I'm not necessarily saying that he replaces his job spot, but necessarily what I'm saying is that he just replaces him on the roster. Because what they're in essence wanting is that Hendon Hooker becomes quarterback number 2, Nate Sudfeld gets cut, and that Jake Fromm takes over as QB number 3. That's what these Lions fans are wanting. And there's a reason why I'm being specific about that, because it's not all Lions fans. It's just a certain amount. It's some of them. Now, I'm not even going to try and defend Nate Sudfeld, because there is simply no defense that you can give for Nate Sudfeld. The writing's on the wall. He is a laughable quarterback. He is terrible ever since we have freaking signed him. He has not improved one bit as a quarterback, despite being in Detroit, working with Jared Goff and working underneath Ben Johnson. Jared Goff is a top 10 quarterback. Ben Johnson is the best offensive coordinator in the NFL. You would think, with the sheer amount of time that he's been with this team, worked with those men, and at the same time has been in the NFL, he would have picked up on some things. But that's simply not happened, at least as far as we've seen. So I'm not trying to defend Nate Sudfeld with this podcast. And let's understand why we're in this situation. The reason why we're in this situation is because with Hooker being healthy, and he is showing that he has the tools to be a competent backup quarterback with time, and the fact that Fromm, when he was in, he showed poise, he showed grit, and he showed a willingness to zip the ball and push the ball down the field, that altogether is something that we have not seen out of Nate Sudfeld. Because Nate Sudfeld is not as athletically gifted as Hooker, not by a long shot. And with Jake Fromm, he was actually willing to push the ball down the field, thread the needle, actually let it all out there. And that's something that we have almost never seen out of Nate Sudfeld. And so when you're talking about this, there are some fans that are having a public outcry that they want Nate Sudfeld removed, or if it does not happen, they are going to renounce their faith in Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. What exactly does that mean? Well, the best way I can describe it is that they're probably still going to be Lions fans, but they're going to have no faith in Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes' decision-making any longer. Okay, let's understand this. I'm all about voicing disagreements. I'm all about voicing displeasure about decisions and opinions. I do it quite a bit on my podcast, especially when it's something that I think is not correct. And I have been more than willing to agree with Lions fans on this topic. That yes, Nate Sudfeld is simply not a good backup quarterback from a talent perspective. However, though, when I make those, decisions to voice about something, to, make a displeasurable video about why I think a certain opinion or a certain, decision is something I don't agree with, I will make a comment about that. And sometimes, depending upon the situation, I may decide to throw an ultimatum in there. But simply put, this is not one of those times. I'm sorry. But for anybody who wants to try and throw an ultimatum here of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell better do this or else, this is not one of those times where you should be pulling that card. Don't get me wrong. I completely, 100% understand how damn frustrating it is to have Nate Sudfeld on this roster, and why his mere presence on this roster is something that turns people's stomachs. It makes them want to throw up. Because let's understand what Nate Sudfeld is to this roster. Simply put, he is a very, very, for lack of a better word, he just doesn't fit. This is a championship roster, and for lack of a better word, he's not a championship caliber anything. I mean, if you want to call him a championship caliber dud, I guess you could go with that. But the point of the matter is that he doesn't fit the qualifications of being on a championship caliber roster. He has terrible stats whenever we've seen him play, whether it's in the preseason or whenever. He's very limited in what he can do as a quarterback. He's shown, like I said, no progress since coming here to Detroit as a quarterback. And the fact of the matter is that he's been around long enough that you would think that he would be able to play on a decent enough level, especially when you consider the fact that Jake Fromm, who's already played better than him in 2 drives, has only been here for a week and a half, whereas Nate Sudfeld has been in this system for going on 2-3 years? But yet Jake Fromm goes out there after only being here for a week and a half, and he plays better than any time we've seen Nate Sudfeld play over the course of this season. And what I mean by that's the preseason. So that right there is why I understand that these fans that are absolutely irate, they are on the verge of simply, throwing the towel in and just saying, I'm done. I understand where they're coming from. But the point of the matter is that when I hear fans state, regardless of whether it's a lot, whether it's a few, whether it's some, I don't care. As soon as I hear a comment like that, that is when I am simply going to be like, okay, here. I hear what you're saying about Nate Sudfeld and Jake Fromm, and I understand why you're saying it. But as soon as you throw that ultimatum out, that's where my understanding ends. Because to say that you are going to make that statement is to completely overlook, overshadow, and diminish all the great work and all of the accomplishments that Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, Sheila, freaking Mike Disner, Spielman, every single one of those guys has done over the last 4 off seasons, 3 years of actual football. Think about it, folks. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, They drafted top-notch players, sticking to their system, sticking to their process, sticking to what they believe in. Drafted freaking Hutch, drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown, drafted Laporta, drafted Sewell, drafted McNeil, drafted Gibbs, drafted Jamo, drafted Branch. All of these guys are top-notch players that every other team in the NFL would love to have their hands on. But yet they're on our team, and that's because of the brilliant strategy and the ability to stick to their beliefs, stick to their core tenets. That's why we have these guys. Then, think about what they've done this offseason by keeping the core together on the offense. They were able to re-sign Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, and Taylor Decker, all to very substantial contracts, and we still have $40+ million in cap space. We have the third most cap space right now, and yet we paid Jared Goff a mega deal contract. We paid Amon-Ra St. Brown a mega deal contract. We paid Penei Sewell a mega deal contract, and we still have $40 million in cap space. Not an easy feat, my friends. Then, think about this. Brad Holmes, Dan Campbell, the whole lot of them, Mike Disner, Spielman, Sheila, include all of them in there. They have had a huge hand in rebuilding, resurrecting the most pitiful franchise in NFL history over the last 20 years. And the only reason I can say that is because for the last 20 years, I have been a fan. I've witnessed it firsthand. And for all my long-suffering Lions fans that have been here even longer than that, you definitely understand where I'm coming from. And they were able to accomplish that, turning around, rebuilding, resurrecting said franchise in 3 years. 3 years is all it took them to make this franchise now one of the best teams in the NFL. It is a top 5 team. It is a Super Bowl contending team. So after all that, everything that I just mentioned, bringing hope, bringing pride to the city of Detroit, making the Lions something that everybody wants to be a part of now. They are a fan base that travels everywhere. After all of that, you have some fans that want to say that if Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell do not cut Nate Sudfeld and put Jake Fromm in his roster spot, that they're going to renounce their faith in Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell's decision-making process. I'm sorry, but no. Again, I understand where people are coming from, but that is an ultimatum that is going way too damn far. That's why it's like, dude, pump the damn brakes. You need to check yourself. Like, seriously, check yourself. Because let's understand something here. Like I said, while I understand, and I do empathize with the fans that are in this predicament about Nate Sudfeld, let's consider something. Let's just play devil's advocate here. Let's just say that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell go the route that's being proposed. You cut Nate Sudfeld, you make Hendon Hooker QB number 2, and you bring in Jake Fromm as QB number 3. Let's just say that that's what happens. Okay, that's good for those people. You're going to have that instant gratification of having what you want. But here comes my follow-up question. At what cost is it going to measure up to? Let me explain. The whole basis of this conversation with Nate Sudfeld, Jake Fromm, Hendon Hooker is all set on the predication of if Jared Goff goes down with an injury and he's out for a while. Now that of the whole sense of the word is highly unlikely. Jared Goff has literally only missed 5 games in his NFL career, and he's been in the league now for 8-9 years. So Jared Goff is very freaking durable. And with the fact that he's behind one of the best offensive lines in the business, the fact that Jared Goff has a very fast release, he makes sure that the ball is taken care of, and he tries his best not to get hit, it's highly unlikely that he would ever have a chance to get injured. Again, knock on wood. But let's play devil's advocate, like I said. Let's just say, for example, Nate Sudfeld gets cut, Hendon Hooker becomes QB number 2, and we keep Jake Fromm. And then now all of a sudden, Jared Goff gets hurt. And let's just put it even further into perspective here. Let's say the Lions are halfway through the season, and they're at like a, 7-1, 6-2 record. They're right in the middle of the thick of it trying to make it to the playoffs. Okay, now you've got a Hendon Hooker coming in who is a very raw, underdeveloped quarterback, and now he has all this pressure on his shoulders to try and maintain the ship and make sure that the Lions continue to win so that way they don't squander a Super Bowl season. I'm going to tell you this right now. When you put all that in perspective, that is an absolutely horrendous idea. And I'm going to tell you why. First and foremost, let's go back to the very first 4 drives against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Saturday. I'm just going to put it out there. Even though Hendon Hooker was working with our backups, seeing how we were playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers starters with him in there, that ought to be a major red flag. Because let's put it into perspective here. If you even had the starters out there with Hendon Hooker, that's not going to cover up a lot of the issues that Hendon Hooker was having. He was holding on to the ball way too damn long. If you take a look at how Jared Goff gets rid of the ball in comparison to how Hendon Hooker was getting rid of the ball, it's a night and day difference. Jared Goff is literally getting that ball out of his hands within 2 seconds, maybe 2.5 seconds. There were times Hendon Hooker was holding on to the ball past 3 or 4 seconds. That's a no-no. You can't hold on to the ball that long. Furthermore, we could clearly see that he was also having problems with his read progressions. He's not fast enough to go through and process all that information. So even with the starters, that's still not going to help. And then again, Hendon Hooker needs to learn how to slide, or otherwise he's going to become an injury liability. These are all things that were observable when you watch the game. And that's not to diminish Hendon Hooker's talent. He's physically gifted. But if you don't have the right mental mindset, if you don't know what the hell you're doing on the field and you're just going out there and playing, that's when you're going to start running into problems. But again, let's understand this. If there's one thing I know about watching the NFL over the last couple of years, because I've been watching football now for going on easily 2 decades. If there's one thing I know, it is this simple fact. If you push or you force a quarterback into a situation that they're not ready for before they're ready, it is most likely going to lead to a disastrous effect for said quarterback. You don't believe me? Take a look at Ryan Leaf. Take a look at Jamarcus Russell. Take a look at Zach Wilson. Take a look at Sam Darnold. Take a look at Paxton Lynch. These are all guys that were put into the starting role long before they should have ever been put into that. Now, while we're not talking about Hooker being in a starting role, we are talking about him being an important, figure in regards to a starting role here. Because, see, what many people forget about a backup quarterback's job and responsibilities is that it's much more than just how you can perform and play in preseason games. See, the backup also has a job, has a responsibility to help the starting quarterback out by making sure they're ready each week, making sure they're watching film, observing things that maybe the starting quarterback misses, helping out in practice, helping out in meetings, running over game plans with the quarterback, with the coaches, with the backups, making sure said backups are on the same page. So if for whatever reason they get called into a game, they're not out there looking like they're clueless. And again, while I'm not questioning Hendon Hooker's leadership at all, I know Hendon Hooker can be a leader. There's a big difference here. The fact of the matter is that Hendon Hooker does not know how to lead on an NFL level yet. He's still on the college level in that regard. He's developing as a quarterback, and let's call it for what it is. Developing as a quarterback is a multifaceted, complex equation. It is not something that is going to be fast. It is not something that is going to be easy. It takes time, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of dedication. And that results in, for some cases, years of work. Hence the reason why, when we're taking a look at Hendon Hooker, yes, he has the physical traits. He has everything you're looking for as far as the physical aspects. Strong arm, has the ability to move in the pocket. These are all things you want from a quarterback nowadays. But the mental aspect is not there yet. The mechanical aspect has not been refined. It's going to take time. It's going to take development. It's going to take you quite a while to get all those things refined and ready to go. This is why I believe that when Campbell infamously said a couple of days ago that Sudfeld has the upper hand in terms of the conversation with him and Hendon Hooker, it's not because that Dan Campbell thinks that Nate Sudfeld is physically more talented than Hendon Hooker. I think the reason why he said that, rather, is that Sudfeld knows what is expected of himself as a backup quarterback, and also as a professional. And that isn't to say that Hooker is not ever going to be in that capability. But as of right now, he isn't. Again, there's a lot of responsibility that the backup quarterback has to assume, has to take care of. And let's call it, freaking Hendon Hooker's not ready to assume that responsibility yet. At least not to assume it and be successful. And that's the thing. These coaches, Dan Campbell, the ownership, the leadership, they want these guys to be successful. They don't want to just throw them to the wolves. They don't want them to fail. They want them to be nurtured. They want them to develop. They want them to be put in a position to succeed. So, my ultimate point here is this. As much as some of these fans have and I'm not even going to say some at this point, I would say all fans have a huge disdain for Nate Sudfeld, but for the ones that are throwing this ultimatum out there, I understand why you don't like Nate Sudfeld as a backup quarterback. I understand the perspective you're coming from, but he serves two important purposes here. The first purpose he serves is that he gives Jared Goff the necessary help to prepare each week and to get the backups ready to be able to be on the same page if they're needed. And again, there's a comfort level, there is I guess you could say, an understanding that the entire offensive, group has with Nate Sudfeld, and also that the coaches have with Nate Sudfeld. They understand what Nate Sudfeld provides. But the second thing, and I would say the more important thing, is that having Nate Sudfeld here, it acts as a buffer to allow Hendon Hooker to progress and to develop without any unnecessary pressure. Because again, if Hendon Hooker was all of a sudden to be number 2 QB, and what I said happens to Jared Goff, all that responsibility, all that pressure is going to be put on his shoulders, and I'm sorry. I've been around Lions fans long enough to know this, that if the Lions started losing with Hendon Hooker at quarterback, they're not going to give one iota, one damn about the fact that Jared Goff is injured. They're going to start pointing their fingers at Hendon Hooker, and that's not fair. Because they're going to be like, our Super Bowl season is getting squandered, and they're going to completely forget about this whole conversation, and all they're going to do is point fingers at Hendon Hooker and say, he's the problem. We need to get a better quarterback. I've seen it happen multiple times. It happens every time. I would much rather have Nate Sudfeld, who I know for a fact, if he was to go in, I know exactly what I'm getting. And I also know this, as a veteran, he can handle it. But when I take a look at Hooker, yeah, he's saying all the right things right now. But when you put all that pressure on somebody, the ability for them to remain composed and able to handle all that pressure, that is a difference maker. And I'm just going to say it right now. I do not believe Hendon Hooker is ready for that yet. I believe he can be. I believe it can happen in the future. But right now, hell no. And that right there would set him up for failure. And I guarantee you this, that is exactly what Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, and the rest of the organization does not want to have happen. They do not want to ruin him. They want to make sure he has a chance to succeed. If not here as a backup quarterback, a starter somewhere else. That's the whole point. You don't intentionally put players in a chance to fail. And that's why I think the Lions are doing what they're doing when it comes to this quarterback situation. As much as Lion fans might not like it, that's the reason why they're doing it. So again, the whole point of this episode is to, one, make sure that the fans that are saying this check themselves, but also, two, to provide some insight as to why I think they're doing this, rather than just simply saying the same tired things that have been said over and over again. This puts a different perspective on it, and hopefully one that people can at least accept a little bit better. But anyway, I'm going to end this episode, and whether or not it does any good, I don't know. But I'm trying my best here when it comes to Lions fans to keep the proper perspective and at the same time not do something supremely rash. Having said that, I'm going to end the episode and say thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past and you forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and not had a chance to do so, again, I want to highly encourage y'all please to subscribe. But I also want to encourage y'all to make sure you hit that bell notification icon so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. I also want to encourage y'all to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we can share it, the greater the channel has a reach, the greater the channel can spread, which allows us to bring in more people to watch the content and to share like-minded ideas, and potentially not like-minded ideas. But having said that, I just want to say I hope you all have enjoyed the content. I hope you all got something out of the content. I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you all got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. And with that being said, I just want to say God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.